This is a quick unedited demonstration of a shader that I've been working on. If you would like to contact me about getting this shader, just hit me up on Discord and we can set something up. When you first put the shader on a material, it's going to look like this. You can see that it's already demonstrating exactly the special thing, I guess, about this shader is that it's got lighting and it's still a projection shader. So it'll draw over, or I guess overlay, as some people call them, overlay shaders, anything that's in it. And anything that's in it's going to get lighting. So this sphere normally has an unlit shader on it, but if it enters the object, now it has lighting, and you can see this nice little specular reflection. So the basic setup of this is as follows. Everything is set up in a way where it should be usable by default, but I'm just going to go over what everything does because there are quite a few options to set this up. Really all you'd need is a texture, let's say ice, and it just kind of works. That's the most basic setup, and it just kind of works. The shader also supports normal maps. So if I load in a normal map here, I can choose how intense the normal map is with this number here. I think 0.5 is fine, and you can see that now the normal map is affecting the lighting. These nice screen space specular highlights are showing up nicely on the normal map, and that helps to smooth out the overall look of everything. The blend modes are what you're going to use to get one of probably two useful effects. The first one is just alpha blended. Opaque pixels are going to be opaque. They're going to write over any geometry that's applicable and keep their transparency so you can't see through it. Setting this to 1, 1 is additive. So if you wanted to make ice that you could still see through, this is how you do it. Now it's going to just add the color to whatever the color in the scene is. So you can still see the colors through it and all the details and stuff like that. So those are really the only two you're going to need. 1, 1 and 1 minus source alpha. All of these are available to you. They are usable because this is a default Unity function that has all of these in it already. So I just have it set up by default with one that works well for everything you're going to need to do here. The lighting is set up with ambient, diffuse, and specular. The ambient lighting is going to decide the sort of always present light, the minimum light, I guess. It's going to control, as this is a lit shader, it's affected by the directional light intensity. So if I set this to 0, the ambient light's going to determine the minimum brightness that this shader can reach. So make this bright again. It's going to have the ambient light already there and not change when the intensity changes. So that's the use of that. These colors are set up already for a very clean look for the shading, but these can all be modified, so you can change the ambient color to whatever you want. You can change the other colors to whatever you want. The diffuse is going to be your present normal lighting. It's not in screen space, so it's going to be your shadows and your basic lighting. So turning this down, you can see that now all that's left is the ambient light, which is these parts, the dark parts rather, and the specular, which I'll go over in just a second. Diffuse is going to be the sort of rest of the shading. You can see it on the sphere too. And again, these color values here are set up already by default in a good configuration for everything to work. Specular is in screen space, so it'll move around with your view just like normal standard reflective, not reflective, normal standard specular does. And the shininess can be changed with this slider. So you can see now it's a lot smaller and it looks a lot shinier, as it should. This, just like everything else, can also be changed. The color can be made so that you get red specular or any color you want. Specular supports HDR, so if you wanted to make it artificially brighter, you could do that with HDR. Anything inside of this object is going to get the same lighting as the settings you put on it. So if I move the sphere entirely inside, you'll see that it now has a nice highlight on it that works just like the rest of the shading does. The alpha mask feature is what's going to allow you to cut this into shapes. So if I select a nice circular mask with a little bit of fade, you'll see that it's cutting out the shape on the floor into this alpha mask. And every texture that has a tiling and offset value is scalable and works with proper offset transforms and whatnot. So you can animate these to scroll or do whatever you want. Now that it has a bit of a fade on the end, you'll see that the transition between being inside of the object and not is a smooth fade. That's controlled by the mask texture. That's how you get that to look as clean as possible. And you might be wondering, what about this hard edge where the object is? The object bounds are. This hard edge can be eliminated with the fade options. The fade start is going to determine where, compared to the object's center, the object is going to start fading into transparency. So if I turn this down just a little bit, even, you can see the difference. It now has a softer edge. It's a lot cleaner. The transition between being covered and not being covered is a lot less noticeable, and this can be changed to be very small or very big. And if I also move the end, you'll see that a hard edge is going to start forming down. So you can get a nice smooth transition animation by animating these two sliders here. The dissolve is going to be the main effect, I guess, of the shader. If we plug in just a random noise texture here, you'll see already something started to happen because of these settings here. If I move the dissolve level up, it'll fade out, and if I move it back down, it'll start to fade the object back in. And the cool thing about the way that this is done is that the edges are controlled by these two colors, so the outer edge can be changed separately, and it'll smooth out a color from your outer edge color to your inner edge color. So if I wanted like a water to ice effect, I would get a nice like dark blue and fade it into the white, and let's say I don't want that really harsh dark blue at the end there, I can just change the alpha lower so that it's smoother, and now I've got this really clean looking water to ice effect that's going to dissolve in with this value here. The edge amount is going to determine how much of the edge is actually taken by the colors. So as I modify that, you can see the colors are growing into more of the actual area of the texture, and all of that is set up in that way. Right now, the dissolve is done in world space set here, so it will map properly to horizontal and vertical geometries. You can see it's mapping in a triplanar fashion as it should be. If you move it, it will not move the texture itself. As you can see, the texture itself stays in place just like a world texture should. If you so desire, you can change this to work in a different way. So if I set the dissolve space to object, now when I move the object around, the entire dissolve material is going to move around, but everything else stays the exact same. If you so desire and you decide that you want to use either no alpha blending or you want to use a different form of cutting out your shape, there is regular standard cutout. If you check the clip alpha box, then it'll work just like a normal cutout shader will, where the alpha of your mask texture controls the cutout of the object. The distort is there if you want to add a bit of a wavy effect to the dissolve. So if I dissolve this a bit and then turn on distort by selecting a noise texture here, the speed and scale of the distortion is going to be controlled by these two values. So the scale is just going to determine how much the textures are moved by this distortion texture, and the speed is going to scroll it in one direction to get the smooth waving effect. If I set this really high, you can see that it's scrolling it really fast, waving really fast, and all the features of the shader work properly with this effect. So you get really interesting looking dissolves. All of this can also be animated, so you can turn off the distortion after it's faded in, if you so choose. And last, but certainly not least, is the full world effect toggle. This requires you to not mask out the texture with a mask, requires it to have its full object bounds, and requires your textures to be tiled. What full world effect does is it causes everything that you can see inside of or through your object is going to get covered with your texture. So if I turn it on right now, you'll see everything that I can see in the box and outside of the box through it is getting covered by the shader. And this will write over things that are in front of it, so be careful with that. And really the only meaningful use for this effect is if you want to do a big full world effect, but you don't want to have to scale the box to like 1,000. Now you would only scale it to as big as you need it for everyone around to be inside of it, and anything that they can see while they're inside of it is going to get covered in this texture, and it's going to get covered in this lighting. And you can see if I animate my directional light that all of the objects that are being covered in this have the same lighting as anything inside of it. So you get this really consistent looking effect across the board here. That is pretty much everything there is to this shader. If you would like to contact me to get your hands on it, feel free to hit me up on Discord. Just let me know what you're there for, and we can set something up. So I hope that you are as interested in this as I was when I started making it, because it's a neat effect. If I forgot to mention something that you feel is important, or you have questions about something that I didn't go over, just hit me up on Discord and let me know, and I'll do my best to explain and help you out. If I forgot to mention something that you feel is important, or you have questions about something that I didn't go over, just hit me up on Discord and let me know, and I'll do my best to explain and help you out.